My name is Ava, and I am 34 years old. 3 days before what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, I sat in a Manhattan law office staring at a 30-page prenuptial agreement I had never seen before. The leather chair felt cold beneath me, and the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park seemed to mock the pit forming in my stomach. I thought this was just a formality, something every couple did. But as I watched my fiance's family lean forward with eyes that suddenly looked less like in-laws and more like sharks circling prey, I realized something was very, very wrong. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to know where you are watching from. Have you ever felt like something was too good to be true? Drop a like. If you have ever questioned your gut feeling, and subscribe, because this story takes a turn nobody saw coming, especially not his family. Let me take you back to how this all started, because understanding where I came from makes everything that happened next make sense. I built my life from absolutely nothing. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, in a modest 3-bedroom house where my father worked as a mechanical engineer and my mother taught elementary school. We were comfortable, sure, but nobody handed me anything. Every scholarship application, every student loan, every late night studying at MIT, I earned it all myself. After graduation, I spent 8 years building a tech startup focused on artificial intelligence for healthcare analytics. Picture endless nights surviving on coffee and determination pitching to investors who doubted a young woman could run a serious tech company debugging code until my eyes burned. But I believed in what we were creating. Our platform could analyze patient data and predict health risks before they became critical. It was not just business. It was going to save lives. Those 8 years of sacrifice finally paid off when Tech Health Corp approached us about acquisition. $9 million. When I saw that number in the offer letter, I had to read it 3 times. $9 million for the company I had built from my tiny Brooklyn apartment. Sure, I would stay on as CEO for 2 more years, but that money represented freedom, security, and validation that every risk I took had been worth it. Even with that success, I never changed who I was. I still lived in my small apartment in Brooklyn, still took the subway to work, still got my morning coffee from the same corner bodega where Luis knew my order by heart. Money was just a number in my bank account. It did not define me. Or so I thought. I met Marcus 18 months before everything fell apart. It was at a charity gala on the Upper East Side, one of those events where tickets cost more than most people's monthly rent. My company had donated, and I figured I should show up and network. I remember feeling out of place in my simple black dress, while everyone else wore designer labels I could not even pronounce. Then Marcus walked up to me at the bar. He was 37 tall, with perfectly styled dark hair, and a smile that could light up the entire room. He wore his tuxedo like he was born in it, which, as I would later learn, he basically was. But what struck me was not his looks. It was how he listened, really listened. When I told him about my startup, his eyes lit up with genuine interest. He asked smart questions about our algorithms, about the challenges of healthcare regulations, about my vision for scaling the business. Most men at those events either dismissed tech talk or tried to mansplain my own company to me. Marcus was different. Or at least I thought he was. Our first date was at a rooftop restaurant with views of Central Park that took my breath away. Marcus ordered wine like he had studied sommelier training, which he had. He told me about his job as an investment banker at Goldman Sachs, about growing up in Connecticut, about his love of classic literature. I told him about debugging code at 3 in the morning and eating ramen for dinner more times than I could count. He laughed at my stories with such warmth that I felt seen in a way I had never experienced. Those first few months felt like a fairy tale. Marcus would show up at my office with coffee and pastries for my whole team. He celebrated every small victory like it was a major milestone. When we closed a particularly difficult client deal, he organized a surprise dinner with my entire staff. He was supportive, encouraging, and seemed to genuinely admire my independence and drive. After 1 year and 2 months together, Marcus proposed on a beach in the Hamptons during sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink that looked almost unreal. He got down on one knee in the sand and said I was the smartest, most driven, most beautiful woman he had ever met. The ring was elegant but not ostentatious, exactly what I would have chosen. I said yes without hesitation. Looking back now, I can see the cracks that were already forming. But when you are in love, you convince yourself that little doubts are just cold feet or stress. You ignore the warning signs because you want so badly to believe in the story you are telling yourself. The first real warning came 3 months into our relationship when Marcus took me to meet his family. I should have paid more attention to how nervous he seemed during the drive to Connecticut. He kept adjusting his tie, checking his reflection in the rearview mirror, reminding me to mention my education, but maybe downplay how much I had built my company myself. At the time, I thought he just wanted his family to like me. Now I understand he was coaching me to play a role. The house no mansion took my breath away for all the wrong reasons. It was a massive European-style estate spanning 12,000 square feet with manicured gardens that probably required a full-time staff. The driveway alone was longer than my entire street in Brooklyn. This was not just wealth. This was generational money, the kind that came with expectations and obligations. Marcus's father, Richard, was 65 years old, with silver hair, and the kind of commanding presence that made you stand up straighter without thinking. He was CEO of the Family Real Estate Development Company, a business his grandfather had founded. Everything about him screamed old money and older values. His handshake was firm to the point of painful, and his eyes assessed me like I was a business proposal he was considering rejecting. Patricia Marcus's mother was 62 and looked like she had stepped out of a society magazine. She had been a model in her youth, and even now her posture was perfect. Her outfit coordinated down to the jewelry that probably cost more than my car. She held charity board positions at half a dozen organizations and made sure you knew it within the first 10 minutes of conversation. Then there was Natalie Marcus's younger sister. At 32, she was already vice president of the family company, clearly being groomed to take over eventually. She wore her ambition like armor, all sharp edges and calculating glances. From the moment we met, she looked at me like I was a competitor rather than a potential sister-in-law. Dinner that night was excruciating. We ate in a formal dining room with a table that could seat 20 people. Everything was served by actual staff, which made me uncomfortable. I grew up setting the table and doing dishes. This level of formality felt like a performance. Patricia asked about my background with the kind of careful politeness that barely masked her disapproval. Where did my parents live? What did they do? Where did I go to school? Each question felt like a test. I was failing. When I mentioned building my startup from scratch, she actually looked surprised, as if the concept of someone creating their own success was foreign to her. Richard barely spoke during dinner, but I could feel him watching me, evaluating every word I said, every move I made. When he did ask questions, they were about market valuations and exit strategies, reducing my life's work to numbers on a spreadsheet. Natalie was more direct in her hostility. She made several comments about the tech bubble and how many startups failed. She questioned whether AI healthcare was really viable or just hype. Every sentence felt like a small knife carefully placed to make me doubt myself. Marcus tried to smooth things over, but even he seemed different in his family's house. He was more formal, more careful with his words, less like the man who brought coffee to my team, and more like someone following a script. As we drove back to the city that night, I told Marcus I felt like his family did not like me. He squeezed my hand and said they just needed time, that they were traditional and protective. He promised they would warm up to me. He promised a lot of things that night that turned out to be lies. I wanted to believe him so badly that I ignored the voice in my head whispering that something was very wrong. The months leading up to the wedding should have been the happiest of my life, but looking back, they were filled with warning signs I was too blind to see. Patricia took complete control of every wedding decision. Every single one. The venue had to be the Plaza Hotel, the same place where she had gotten married 40 years ago. The dress designer had to be someone from her approved list. The guest list ballooned from the intimate gathering of 50 people I wanted to over 200 of their society friends, most of whom I had never met. Every time I tried to voice an opinion, Patricia would smile that tight smile and say something like, "We know what is best for events like these, dear," or "Trust me, you will thank me later." It was not collaboration. It was annexation. She was erasing me from my own wedding and repainting it in her family's image. The worst part was not Patricia's control. It was Marcus's silence. When I would complain to him privately, he would sigh and say things like, "Let us just keep the peace," or "It is just one day, it is not worth the fight." But it was not just one day. It was a pattern, a preview of how our entire marriage would work. His family's wants would always trump my needs, and he would always choose their approval over my feelings. My best friend Jordan tried to warn me. She was 33, my college roommate from MIT, and the most loyal person I had ever met. She worked as a corporate lawyer and had a sixth sense for sketchy behavior. Over coffee one morning, 6 weeks before the wedding, she put her hand on mine and said, "Ava, this is not normal. You should have a say in your own wedding. These are red flags." I defended Marcus. I always defended Marcus. I told Jordan she did not understand that blending families was complicated, that compromise was part of marriage. She looked at me with such sadness in her eyes and said, "Compromise goes both ways. What is his family compromising?" I had no answer. 3 months before the wedding, everything seemed to shift in an unexpected direction. Tech Health Corp finalized their acquisition offer, $9 million. The contracts were signed, the money was transferred, and suddenly I had more wealth than I had ever imagined. Marcus was thrilled. He took me to dinner at the most expensive restaurant in Manhattan, ordered champagne that cost more per bottle than I used to spend on groceries in a month, and toasted to our future. His excitement was infectious, and for a moment I let myself believe everything was going to be okay. Then he suggested we celebrate with his family. At the time, it seemed natural. They were going to be my family too, right? So we went back to that massive Connecticut mansion, and something fundamental changed. Richard and Patricia greeted me warmly. Actually warmly. Patricia hugged me, which she had never done before. Richard shook my hand and called me a brilliant businesswoman. Natalie, who had barely been civil before, suddenly wanted to know all about the acquisition, asking detailed questions about the deal structure, the payout timeline, the terms of my continued involvement. I should have questioned this sudden shift. I should have wondered why $9 million changed their opinion of me, when my achievements, my character, and my love for their son had not mattered before. But I was so relieved to finally feel accepted that I did not ask the hard questions. I just basked in the warmth of their approval, not realizing it was not me they had accepted. It was my bank account. Over dinner that night, they wanted to know everything. How was the money structured? Was it liquid or tied up in stocks? What were my plans for investing it? Richard even mentioned that their company had some excellent real estate opportunities if I was interested in diversifying my portfolio. At the time, I thought he was being helpful, trying to include me in the family business. Now I know he was sizing up his mark. The conversations felt sophisticated adult, like I was finally being treated as an equal. Patricia talked about joining her charity boards. Natalie suggested we have lunch to discuss potential business collaborations. Marcus squeezed my hand under the table and smiled like everything was falling into place exactly as it should. I drove home that night feeling like I had finally crossed some invisible threshold. They accepted me. We were going to be a real family. I was so naive. The first hint that something was seriously wrong came 2 weeks before the wedding. It was 2 in the morning, and I woke up thirsty. Marcus was not in bed. I found him in the living room of his apartment, pacing back and forth, speaking in hushed, urgent tones on his phone. I caught fragments of the conversation. The money, after the wedding, restructure the debt, 30 days maximum. I stood in the hallway, my heart suddenly pounding, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. When Marcus finally noticed me, he jumped. Actually jumped like he had been caught doing something wrong. He quickly ended the call and plastered on a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Just a client situation," he said. "Difficult deal closing, work stress." I wanted to believe him. I asked if everything was okay, if he needed to talk about it. He kissed my forehead and said everything was fine. Just typical Wall Street drama, nothing for me to worry about. He guided me back to bed and held me until I fell asleep. But I could feel the tension in his body, the way his heart raced against my back. After that night, I started noticing things I had been too distracted to see before. Marcus took calls and immediately left the room. He came home from work later and later, always with explanations about big deals and demanding clients. His phone was suddenly password protected when it had never been before. When I asked about wedding details, he seemed distracted, barely listening. The most unsettling part was how he started asking about my money. Casual questions at first. Had the tech health funds fully cleared? Was I keeping it all in one account? Had I thought about investment strategies? Did I have a financial advisor? Each question alone seemed innocent, even caring like a future husband being financially responsible. But together they formed a pattern that made my stomach twist with anxiety I could not quite name. I confided in Jordan again. She listened carefully, that lawyer brain of hers processing every detail. Then she asked me one question that I could not stop thinking about. Ava, has Marcus ever asked about your money before the acquisition? The answer was no. Before I had $9 million, Marcus never once asked about my finances. He had paid for most of our dates, never expecting me to split bills, never discussing money at all. It was only after the acquisition that money became a constant topic. But I pushed the doubts away. I was overthinking, I was stressed about the wedding. I was letting Jordan's natural skepticism infect my trust. Marcus loved me. We were getting married in 2 weeks. Everything was going to be fine. I wish I'd listened to my gut. 3 days before the wedding, Marcus asked me to come with him to meet his family's lawyer. He presented it casually over breakfast at my apartment like it was no big deal. Just some standard paperwork, he said. Estate planning stuff. Totally routine. I asked why we had not discussed this before. He shrugged and said his parents had just mentioned it, that they had forgotten to bring it up earlier. When I asked what kind of paperwork, he was vague. Legal stuff for families with assets. Protection paperwork. Everyone does it. Something in my chest tightened, but I nodded and agreed to go. It was 2 in the afternoon when we arrived at the law office on Park Avenue, one of those buildings with marble floors and hushed voices, where even the elevator felt expensive. The office itself was all dark wood and leather with law books lining the walls that probably had not been opened in decades. They were just decoration symbols of tradition and authority. Marcus's whole family was already there. Richard sat in a high-back chair like a king on a throne. Patricia perched elegantly on a sofa, her posture perfect. Natalie leaned against the desk with her arms crossed, looking like she owned the place. And there was the lawyer, Mr. Harrison, 60 years old, with gray hair and cold eyes that had probably destroyed lives in courtrooms. He stood when we entered, shook my hand with a grip designed to intimidate, and gestured to a chair positioned to face everyone else. I was surrounded. That was when Mr. Harrison placed the prenuptial agreement in front of me. 30 pages. Thick cardstock paper. Dense legal language that might as well have been written in another language. My brain stuttered to a stop. A prenup. 3 days before the wedding, I looked at Marcus, waiting for him to apologize for the surprise to something. But he would not meet my eyes. Richard spoke first, his voice carrying that authoritative tone that expected obedience. This is standard procedure for families of our standing, Ava. We need to protect assets that have been in our family for generations. Surely you understand. I tried to process what was happening. A prenup itself was not unreasonable. Plenty of couples had them. But 3 days before the wedding, without any warning, without giving me time to review it with my own lawyer, every cell in my body screamed that this was wrong. I took a breath and said I would need time to read through this carefully and consult with my own attorney. It seemed like a completely reasonable request. It was a completely reasonable request. Patricia's smile went sharp. We have been more than patient, Ava. The wedding is in 3 days. This really should have been handled months ago, but we are willing to accommodate. We just need you to sign today. Today I looked around the room, seeing their faces clearly for the first time. This was not a family meeting. This was an ambush. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat and began reading through the key points in a voice that was clearly designed to bore me into submission, to make me stop listening to the actual words. The prenup protected all assets acquired before marriage. It outlined how any assets acquired during marriage would be divided based on contribution ratios. If we divorced in the first 5 years, neither party would receive alimony. All of that seemed relatively standard, if harsh. But then Mr. Harrison kept going, and the language got strange. There were clauses about family business investment opportunities. If I invested in the family company, it would be considered a gift, not an investment, meaning I could never get that money back, regardless of what happened to the marriage. I interrupted him. Can you explain that clause more clearly? He blinked slowly like I was annoying him by asking questions about a legal document that would govern my entire financial future. It simply means that any voluntary financial contributions to family business enterprises are considered goodwill gestures rather than investments with expected returns. That made no sense. Why would I sign something that said any money I put into their business was just a gift? I flipped through the pages trying to find the exact language and found another concerning clause on page 25. It stated that any transfer of funds to family accounts within 6 months of marriage would automatically be considered community property, subject to family business bylaws. What did that even mean? I tried to parse the legal language, but it was deliberately confusing layers of jargon designed to obscure rather than clarify. I looked up at Richard. Why are these clauses necessary? His expression did not change. They protect both parties. Family businesses are complex, Ava. These provisions ensure clarity. But they did not ensure clarity. They ensured control. They ensured that if I put money into their business, I would have no legal recourse to get it back. The more I read, the more I realized this prenup was not about protecting assets. It was about taking mine. I closed the folder and said I needed to take this home, review it thoroughly, and have my own lawyer examine it before signing anything. The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. Richard leaned forward slightly, his eyes hard. Ava, we need an answer today. The wedding is in 3 days. Guests are flying in. Everything is arranged. We cannot have uncertainty about this. Patricia added, voice sweet but threatening. If you truly love Marcus, this should not be an issue. It is just paperwork. A formality. Natalie uncrossed her arms and said flatly, every woman who marries into this family signs. It is tradition. My mother signed. I would sign if I ever got married. It is what we do. I looked at Marcus, really looked at him, waiting for him to defend me, to tell his family they were being unreasonable to support me in any way. He stared at the floor. My voice came out smaller than I wanted. Marcus, can we talk privately? He glanced at his father, actually glanced at his father for permission before nodding. We stepped into the hallway and I could feel my hands shaking. Why did you not tell me about this? I asked. Why are we doing this 3 days before the wedding? He ran his hand through his hair, looking stressed but not apologetic. I am sorry. I thought my parents told you. Look, it is just a formality. We are not going to get divorced. This is just to make them feel secure. But the clauses about investing in the family business, they do not make sense. I need a lawyer to explain them. His jaw tightened. Ava, if you do not sign, my family will cancel the wedding. Everything is already paid for. 200 guests. Do you want to be responsible for that embarrassment? The words hit me like a slap. Not we would be embarrassed. I would be responsible. He was putting this on me, making me the villain if I did not sign away my rights. I have already put my foot down so much for us, he continued, and I suddenly realized how many times he had said similar things, always framing his family's demands as sacrifices he was making. My family was against this wedding at first because you were not from their world. I fought for you. I convinced them. And now you cannot do this one thing to make them feel secure. It was emotional manipulation disguised as love. I could see it clearly now, standing in that hallway with ugly fluorescent lighting humming overhead. But I was trapped. 3 days before the wedding, my dress was hanging in my apartment. My parents had flown in from Portland. Jordan had organized a bachelorette party. How could I call it all off over a prenup I told Marcus I needed until tomorrow to think about it? His face went red. Tomorrow, Ava, they need the answer now. One night I said firmly, one night to process this. That is not unreasonable. We went back into the office and I told Richard and Patricia I would give them my answer the next morning. Richard looked like he wanted to argue, but Marcus jumped in, promising them I would sign that I just needed time to feel comfortable with everything. The drive back to Brooklyn was silent. Marcus dropped me off and said he would call me later. I watched his car drive away and felt like I was drowning. The second I got inside, I called Jordan. Jordan opened her apartment door in sweatpants and an MIT hoodie, took one look at my face and pulled me inside. I collapsed on her couch and told her everything while she made tea neither of us would drink. She listened without interrupting, her lawyer face getting sharper with every detail. When I finished, she held out her hand. Let me see it. I pulled the prenup from my bag and we spread all 30 pages across her coffee table. Jordan put on her reading glasses and started going through it line by line, occasionally making small sounds of disgust. After 45 minutes, she looked up at me. This is one of the most predatory prenups I have ever seen. And I have seen a lot. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? She pointed to the clause about family business investments. This language is deliberately vague. If you put any money into their business, this clause means you have no legal standing to get it back even if they commit fraud or the business fails. You would just lose everything. But why would they include that unless they were planning to take my money? Jordan looked at me with such sadness. Ava, I think you need to consider that possibility. No. No, Marcus loves me. His family might be manipulative, but he would not deliberately try to steal from me. Jordan opened her laptop. Let me do some research. While she typed, I sat there trying to make sense of everything. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe this was just how wealthy families protected themselves. Maybe I was letting my insecurity about not coming from money cloud my judgment. Then Jordan made a sound that made my blood run cold. Oh no, Ava, look at this. She turned the laptop toward me. It was a news article from 2 years ago about a lawsuit against the family real estate company. A group of investors had sued for fraud, claiming the company had misrepresented the financial status of a development project. The case had been settled out of court with confidential terms. There was more. Jordan found recent articles from business publications discussing financial difficulties at the company. Phrases like mounting debt and failed development projects and seeking emergency capital. The company was in trouble, serious trouble. Jordan kept searching and found my email account on her computer with my permission. She started going through my emails from Marcus looking for anything unusual. And then she found it. An email draft in Marcus's account that he had forgotten to delete. Or maybe he had meant to delete it but hit save draft instead. The email was from 3 months ago, right after my acquisition closed. It was addressed to Richard and Natalie. Dad, I think I can get her to invest after the wedding. She trusts me completely. With $9 million, we can cover the debts and restructure. Richard had replied, Good work, son. Make sure the prenup protects us if things go south. Natalie had replied after that. Once the money is in the prenup, makes it nearly impossible for her to get it back. Smart move. I read the emails 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. My brain could not process what my eyes were seeing. This was not possible. Marcus loved me. We were getting married. This had to be fake or taken out of context or something, anything other than what it obviously was. Jordan put her hand on my shoulder. I am so sorry. But there was more. Jordan searched deeper and found Marcus's LinkedIn account. He had connected with the CFO of Tech Health Corp 8 months before I even knew they were interested in acquiring my company. She found message threads where Marcus had been introducing the CFO to people in the tech investment community, facilitating connections, smoothing the path. The timeline became clear and sickening. Marcus had orchestrated the sale of my company. He had helped make sure Tech Health came to the table with a strong offer. He had probably even influenced the $9 million valuation. Also, his family could steal that money to save their failing business. Everything was a lie. The romantic proposal on the beach, the supportive boyfriend bringing coffee to my team, the man who listened to me talk about healthcare algorithms like it mattered. All of it was an elaborate con to get access to wealth his family desperately needed. I felt like I could not breathe. My chest was tight. My vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. How long had this been planned? Had Marcus ever loved me at all? Or was I just a target from the moment we met at that charity gala? Jordan wrapped her arms around me while I tried not to fall apart completely. We sat there on our couch surrounded by evidence of betrayal so calculated. It felt like something from a movie, except this was my life. My heart, my future, shattering around me. Eventually my tears stopped. And underneath the heartbreak I felt something else rising. Anger. Cold, clear, focused anger. They thought I was naive. They thought I was so desperate to be accepted by their wealthy family that I would sign away my rights without question. They thought they could manipulate me, use me, and steal from me. They thought wrong. I sat up straight and looked at Jordan. What are my options? Jordan smiled, and it was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a lawyer who had just spotted a weakness in the enemy's defense. Let me make some calls. We worked through the night. Jordan called one of her partners at her law firm, a woman named Emily Thompson, who specialized in complex financial litigation and had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless in defense of her clients. Emily arrived at Jordan's apartment at 6 in the morning with coffee, a laptop, and the kind of energy that came from genuinely loving legal combat. She was 45 years old with short silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. She read through the prenup once, then again, taking notes. Finally, she looked up at me. This prenup is designed to trap you. If you sign it and invest any money in their business, you will lose everything. But here's the thing. They have made several critical mistakes. Tell me, I said. First, the language is so aggressive that any halfway decent judge would question whether you signed under duress, especially given the timing. Second, they are operating under the assumption that you will have access to that $9 million after the wedding. What if you did not? I do not understand. Emily leaned forward. What if you restructured your assets before signing? What if that money was no longer yours in the technical sense? Jordan jumped in. A trust. We put everything in a trust structure. Emily nodded. Exactly. A complex trust with you as trustee, but with layers of protection that make the assets untouchable without approval from a trust committee. If the money is not technically your personal property anymore, the prenup clauses become meaningless. But could we do that in time? The wedding is 3 days away. Emily checked her watch. I know a financial advisor who owes me a favor. We can have this set up by 9 this morning. And Ava, once we do this, you need to decide something. Are you walking away from this wedding, or are you playing the long game? I thought about Marcus, about the emails, about sitting in that law office surrounded by people who saw me as nothing but a bank account, about the 18 months of lies and manipulation. I am signing the prenup, I said. Let them think they won. Emily smiled. Now we are talking. She made a call, and within 30 minutes, we were video conferencing with a financial advisor named David Morrison. He was 52, specialized in asset protection, and worked fast. While Emily explained what we needed, David was already pulling up documents on his screen. The structure he created was brilliant. He set up a multi-layer trust with offshore components. The $9 million would be transferred from my personal account into the trust. I would serve as trustee, but any distribution from the trust would require written approval from a trust committee consisting of Emily, David, and Jordan. Technically, I would no longer own the money. The trust owned it. The prenup's clauses about my assets would not apply because the assets were not mine anymore. They belonged to a legal entity. We worked through the morning executing the transfers. David had contacts at banks who could expedite things. By 9:15 in the morning, my personal bank account no longer held $9 million. It held $800 in change. Everything else was locked inside a trust structure so complex that even I barely understood it. The prenup was now useless. Even if I signed it, even if I got married, even if Marcus and his family tried to pressure me into investing in their business, I literally could not access the money without approval from 3 other people who would never give it. Emily looked satisfied. Now you sign their prenup and you do it like you are a woman who has accepted her fate. At 10 in the morning, I called Marcus. He answered on the first ring, sounding anxious. Ava, have you decided I am ready to sign? I said, making my voice soft and resigned. You are right. I was overthinking things. I love you and I trust you. Let us just move forward. The relief in his voice was palpable. Really? Oh, thank God. I knew you would understand. Come to the office at 11. My family will be so happy. I hung up and looked at Emily and Jordan. They both looked worried. Are you sure about this? Jordan asked. You could just walk away right now. I could. But walking away meant Marcus and his family would just find another victim, another woman to manipulate and steal from. I wanted them to face consequences, real consequences. Emily, what are the next steps? She pulled out her phone. I am going to file some documents this afternoon. Nothing that will hit their radar immediately, but trust me, the dominoes are about to start falling. What kind of documents? Request for investigation into financial fraud. I am going to send anonymous tips to the SEC about potential securities violations based on what Jordan found. Their creditors are going to start getting nervous. And once banks start pulling loans, companies like theirs collapse fast. Can you really do all that by tomorrow? Emily smiled. Honey, I can do it by tonight. I walked into that Park Avenue law office at 11 o'clock, looking like a woman who had surrendered. I wore a simple gray dress, minimal makeup kept my eyes down. I played the role they expected. The compliant bride, the woman who knew her place. Marcus's whole family was there again, looking pleased with themselves. Patricia actually came over and hugged me, something that would have meant the world to me a week ago. Now it felt like being embraced by a snake. Mr. Harrison had the prenup ready, fresh copies with signature lines highlighted in yellow. He walked me through the pages again, that same boring drone in his voice, clearly expecting me to just sign without paying attention. I picked up the pen. Richard leaned forward slightly. Marcus held his breath. Natalie watched with barely concealed triumph. And I signed. Every page, slowly, carefully making sure each signature was clear and legally binding. When I finished, Mr. Harrison gathered the papers and said, "Congratulations, everything is finalized." Richard stood and shook my hand. "Welcome to the family, Ava." "We should celebrate." "Actually," I said, with a small smile, "I have a wedding to prepare for. I will see you all tomorrow." I walked out of that office with my head high. They had no idea what I had just done. They thought they had won. They thought the prenup gave them legal protection to steal my money. They did not know the money was already gone, locked away, where they could never touch it. Marcus walked me to my car. He kissed me and said, "I am so glad you understand. I love you so much." "I love you too." I lied. That afternoon, Emily went to work. She filed formal requests with the court for investigation into financial irregularities at the family real estate company. She sent detailed tips to the Securities and Exchange Commission outlining potential fraud based on the public information Jordan had found. She contacted several financial journalists with anonymous information about a prominent real estate family hiding serious debt. By evening, the first domino fell. A business blog published an article titled, "Troubled Real Estate Empire Faces Questions." It was not explicit, but it mentioned the family company and referenced the old lawsuit and current debt problems. Within hours, the company's creditors started making calls. When you are already in financial trouble, even a hint of scandal can trigger panic. Banks that had extended lines of credit wanted reassurance. Investors in their projects wanted meetings. The facade of wealth and stability began to crack. By midnight, major financial news outlets picked up the story. The coverage was more aggressive, with headlines about legacy companies facing modern accountability and generations of wealth potentially built on questionable practices. Marcus called me 15 times that evening. I did not answer. I turned off my phone and slept better than I had in months. I woke up at 6 in the morning, my wedding day, and the first thing I did was check my email. The news was everywhere. Century-old real estate empire files. Chapter 11, Bankruptcy, screamed the headline from the Wall Street Journal. I read the article twice, absorbing every detail. The company had filed for bankruptcy protection overnight, unable to meet debt obligations. The article cited mounting debts from failed development projects and declining property values. It mentioned investigations by federal regulators. It quoted anonymous sources saying the company had been insolvent for over a year. My phone had 23 missed calls. Marcus, Richard, Patricia, even Natalie. Text messages flooded in. "Call me immediately. Where are you? We need to talk now." Emergency. I made coffee and waited. At 7 in the morning, my phone rang again. This time I answered. Marcus sounded hysterical. "Ava, where is the money? We need it now." What money?" I asked, calmly sipping my coffee. "The 9 million. You need to transfer it today. Our company is going under. Everything is falling apart. We need that money to stay afloat." "Oh, I said the $9 million. Well, Marcus, here is the thing. It is in a trust now. I do not have access to it." Silence. Then what? When yesterday morning, before I signed your prenup, I restructured all my assets. You see, I realized that prenup was designed to let you steal my money, so I made sure there was no money to steal. More silence. I could hear him breathing hard on the other end. I know everything, Marcus. The emails, the plan, how you orchestrated the sale of my company, how you never loved me. You just saw a target and executed a con. His voice cracked. No, that is not, I do love you. We needed help and I thought we would pay you back. You planned to trap me in a marriage with a prenup that made it impossible for me to get my money back if I invested in your family's failing business. That is not borrowing. That is theft. That is fraud. Ava, please. His voice dissolved into something close to begging. You do not understand. My family, the pressure, we are going to lose everything. You already lost everything, I said. The wedding is off. Lose my number. You cannot do this. We have 200 guests. The plaza. Everything is paid for. You did this to yourself, all of you. You tried to con me and it backfired. Now you get to deal with the consequences. Ava, please, I am begging you. Goodbye, Marcus. I hung up and blocked his number. Then I blocked Richard, Patricia, and Natalie. I sent a mass text to all the wedding guests. The wedding is canceled due to unforeseen circumstances. We apologize for any inconvenience. I called the wedding planner and told her to cancel everything. She was shocked, but professional. I called my parents and explained everything. My father said he was proud of me for walking away. My mother cried but agreed it was the right choice. Jordan came over with bagels and champagne. We sat on my couch eating breakfast and watching the news coverage of the bankruptcy. It was everywhere. The family that had seemed so powerful, so untouchable, was falling apart in real time. Over the next week, the story got bigger. Federal investigators announced formal inquiries into the company's financial practices. The SEC opened an investigation into securities fraud. The old lawsuit was reopened as new information came to light about hidden debts and misrepresented assets. Marcus's career imploded. Goldman Sachs suspended him pending their own internal investigation into whether he had used his position to facilitate fraud. His reputation in the finance world was destroyed overnight. The family's social standing collapsed just as fast. Patricia resigned from all her charity boards, probably asked to leave before they had to remove her. Richard faced potential criminal charges. Natalie, who had been so smug about family tradition, was forced to resign from the company before it fully dissolved. They had to sell the Connecticut mansion. The plaza wedding that never happened was just the first of many payments they could not make. Their entire lifestyle built on generations of wealth, and the presumption of permanence vanished in days. And I did not contact them once. I moved on with my life like they had never existed. My wedding dress went to a charity that provided gowns to low-income brides. The ring went back via courier with no note. I blocked everyone connected to that family on every platform and started fresh. The best revenge was not some dramatic confrontation. It was watching them destroy themselves while I walked away untouched. The first 2 weeks after everything fell apart were harder than I expected. Even though I knew Marcus had never really loved me, even though I had proof of his betrayal, my heart had not caught up to my brain yet. I grieved the relationship I thought I had. I mourned the future I had imagined. I cried more than I wanted to admit. Jordan moved into my apartment, temporarily sleeping on my couch and making sure I ate actual meals instead of surviving on coffee and rage. She would sit with me while I cried, never telling me to get over it, just being present while I processed the trauma of discovering that 18 months of my life had been a lie. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Linda Hayes, who specialized in emotional manipulation and betrayal trauma. She helped me understand that what Marcus and his family did was not just lying. It was a calculated psychological campaign designed to make me doubt my own judgment and comply with their demands. In our sessions, I started recognizing all the red flags I had missed. How Marcus isolated me from friends by making his family events mandatory. How he always framed disagreements as me being difficult rather than him being unreasonable. How he used my desire to be loved and accepted as a weapon against me. The hardest part was forgiving myself for not seeing it sooner. Dr. Hayes reminded me that I was not stupid or naive. I was a successful CEO who had built a company from nothing. But love makes us vulnerable, and skilled manipulators know exactly how to exploit that vulnerability. After about a month, something shifted. I woke up one morning and realized I had not thought about Marcus for an entire day. The constant weight on my chest felt lighter. I could breathe deeper. I threw myself back into work. My role as CEO of my startup, even post-acquisition, gave me purpose and structure. The team welcomed me back with so much support. Several of them had met Marcus and admitted they always felt something was off about him, but had not wanted to overstep. We launched a new product feature that analyzed patient data for early cancer detection. It was a huge success, exceeding all our projections. The work reminded me why I had built this company in the first place. It was not about money or success or impressing anyone. It was about creating something meaningful that helped people. 6 months after the wedding that never happened, I started making different kinds of investments with my money. I put capital into women-led startups, the kinds of businesses that had trouble getting funding because investors did not take female founders seriously. I mentored young entrepreneurs, especially women in tech, who face the same doubts and barriers I had overcome. I started a small foundation focused on financial literacy for women, teaching them about asset protection prenups and how to recognize financial manipulation. Every woman I helped felt like I was preventing another Marcus from succeeding. I reconnected with friends I had neglected during my relationship with Marcus, college friends who lived in other cities, former coworkers. My network expanded and strengthened in ways that had nothing to do with social status or wealth. Jordan and I took a trip to Japan, something I had always wanted to do, but Marcus had dismissed as not his style. We spent 2 weeks exploring Tokyo, Kyoto, and small mountain villages. I learned to let go of the need to control everything and just experience moments. I tried new hobbies, pottery classes where I made lopsided bowls and laughed at my lack of natural talent, a book club that met monthly and argued passionately about literary themes, solo trips to national parks where I hiked trails and felt small in the best way. Dating was not a priority. I needed time to heal, to rediscover who I was outside of a relationship, to rebuild my trust in my own judgment. When people asked if I was seeing anyone, I said I was dating myself, and I meant it. But slowly I did start to open up to the possibility of connection again. Not relationships built on fairy tale romance or grand gestures, but real partnerships based on mutual respect, honest communication, and shared values. The most important lesson I learned was about my own worth. For too long, I had believed that being accepted by Marcus's family meant I had value. Their approval felt like validation, that I had made it, that I belonged in spaces I had not been born into. But I did not need their approval. I did not need anyone's approval. I had built a successful company. I had created technology that saved lives. I had intelligence, drive, and integrity. My worth was not determined by who I married or what social circles accepted me. Understanding that felt like coming home to myself. A year after I signed that prenup and walked away from a marriage built on lies, I was healthier, happier, and more centered than I had ever been. The pain had transformed into strength. The betrayal had taught me discernment. The loss had created space for genuine growth. And I never regretted my choice. Not once. Some people thought I was bitter or angry, but I was not. I was free. I learned that sometimes the best thing that never happens is the wedding that never was. Sometimes the greatest gift is discovering the truth before you legally bind yourself to people who see you as nothing more than an opportunity to exploit. I learned that a signature can protect you just as much as it can trap you. The key is knowing what you are really signing up for, whether it is a contract or a life. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from what everyone else thinks you should want to protect, what you know you deserve. The $9 million is still sitting in that trust, growing through careful investments David manages. I draw from it for my foundation and my startup investments. But mostly, it just exists as proof that I protected myself when it mattered most. Marcus and his family disappeared from my world completely. Occasionally, I see news articles about the ongoing investigations or the final dissolution of their company. Richard faced fraud charges, but settled with massive fines and probation. Patricia moved to a small condo in Florida. Natalie got a job at a mid-level real estate firm in a different state. Marcus left finance entirely. Last I heard, he was working in his uncle's insurance business in Ohio. They lost everything because they tried to take everything. The universe has a funny way of delivering justice. As for me, I am building a life based on authenticity, generosity, and self respect. I have real friends who know the worst parts of me and love me anyway. I have work that challenges and fulfills me. I have freedom to make choices based on my values rather than other people's expectations. Someone asked me recently if I was afraid to trust again after what happened. I thought about it carefully before answering. I am not afraid to trust, I said. I am just much better at recognizing who deserves that trust. And I trust myself most of all. That is the real victory. Not the money I protected or the revenge that played out in bankruptcy courts. The victory is that I know my worth. I trust my judgment. And I will never again let anyone make me feel like I need to prove I deserve basic respect and honesty. I am Ava. I am 34 years old. I built a company that saves lives. I protected myself from people who tried to use me. I walked away from a wedding 3 days before it happened because I chose myself over their expectations. And I would do it again in a heartbeat. So let me ask you, have you ever had to choose between what others expected of you and what you knew was right for yourself? Have you ever walked away from something that looked perfect on the outside, but felt wrong on the inside? Drop a comment and tell me your story. And if this resonated with you, hit that like button, subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength in difficult moments, and share this with someone who needs to hear that choosing yourself is never selfish. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that your worth is never negotiable, and protecting yourself is always the right choice. Stay strong, trust yourself, and remember that the right people will never make you question your value. Take care of yourselves out there.